The story did not begin with a choice. It began with an experiment. On the night I was born, my grandfather did not wrap me in cloth or place me in my mother's arms. Instead, he carried my tiny, crying body into the mountains behind the village, where a wooden coffin lay hidden beneath layers of earth and old talismans. Inside that coffin rested the corpse of a female spirit, a vengeful ghost sealed there years ago, her resentment still thick in the air. The villagers believed this woman had died unjustly. Her hatred had not dispersed. Even in death, she was dangerous. My grandfather opened the coffin. Without hesitation, he placed me inside. To him, this was not cruelty. It was proof. For generations, my family had guarded forbidden knowledge. Arts meant to balance life and death, not to defy them. But my grandfather believed the world had grown arrogant, dismissing the old ways as superstition. He wanted to show them something undeniable. He wanted to prove that ghostly milk carried more nourishment than human milk. A newborn infant crawled instinctively. I pressed myself against the cold, lifeless chest of the female spirit and began to feed. No one knows what truly flowed into my body that night, whether it was lingering spiritual essence, resentment, or something far darker. What is known is this: I lived, but the village paid the price. From that night onward, every woman in the village lost her milk. Mothers cried as their infants weakened day by day. Newborns starved. Tiny coffins began to line the roads leading to the ancestral burial ground. The villagers searched for a cause, and soon their eyes turned to me. They whispered that I had stolen what did not belong to me, that I had drunk life meant for others, that my survival was an omen. Fear turned into hatred. They demanded my death. More than once, the villagers gathered firewood and ropes, insisting I be burned alive to cleanse the village of misfortune. Each time, my grandfather stood between them and me, his back straight, his eyes calm, as if he were standing before spirits rather than men. He did not argue, he did not plead. He simply said, "If you kill him, you will owe the debt yourselves." No one understood what that meant, but something in his voice kept them from acting. That night, the night the villagers nearly lost control, hundreds of luxury cars flooded the dirt road leading into our village. Powerful people arrived from distant cities, people whose names appeared in newspapers, people who claimed they had once received guidance from my grandfather and owed him everything they had. They came seeking answers, seeking survival, seeking fate itself. And from that night on, the villagers were no longer brave enough to touch me. But the damage had already been done. I grew up alive in a village full of graves. This was the origin of my abnormal fate. I was a child who survived by violating the natural order, and the world would never let me forget it. When I was still too young to understand words like destiny or consequence, my grandfather made another decision, one far more dangerous than placing me inside a coffin. He arranged my marriage. It was not a union of families. It was a contract written in the language of heaven. Using divination methods forbidden to ordinary practitioners, my grandfather glimpsed a narrow thread of survival stretching into my future. That thread was tied to a girl born 3 months younger than me. Her name did not matter at the time. What mattered was that our fates were already entangled. The engagement was sealed not with words, but with cosmic alignment. One condition was set above all others. We were not to meet until my 21st birthday. Until that day, my fate was incomplete. Alongside this promise came a rule more absolute than law. I was forbidden to practice any form of divination, geomancy, or spiritual intervention before turning 21. No fortune-telling, no life reading, no interference with cause and effect. My grandfather knew exactly what would happen if I broke this rule. Before 21, he told me, your destiny is not yours to use. If you interfere, you will lose more than you gain. At the time, I thought he meant physical weakness or spiritual backlash. I was wrong. When I was 18, I broke the rule. I saw death approaching someone I cared about. I knew the signs, I understood the pattern. And despite my grandfather's warnings, I intervened. The person lived, but I fell gravely ill. For 3 days, I vomited blood and lost consciousness. When I finally awoke, my grandfather was gone. Later, my mother told me what happened. The night after I collapsed, my grandfather walked alone into the mass grave behind the mountain. He chose the worst possible burial site, a place with broken geomancy where no living thing should rest. He dug a shallow pit with his own hands and lay down inside it. No coffin, no protection, no ceremony. He traded his remaining lifespan for mine. Only then did I understand the true meaning of living on borrowed life. My existence was no longer just abnormal. It was an unpaid debt. From that day forward, I stopped attending school. I stopped caring about the future. The only thing that kept me alive was the promise my grandfather left behind. The woman I was meant to marry. She was the last wish of the man who died for me. And so I waited, not for love, not for happiness, but for the moment when destiny would finally come to collect its due. Fate does not announce itself loudly. It whispers first. I turned 21 on a cold morning, the kind where the sky feels too low and the air presses down on your chest. According to my grandfather's calculations, this was the day my destiny would finally align. This was the day I was supposed to meet the woman tied to my survival. She never came. At first, I thought it was a delay, a mistake, a misunderstanding. Then the signs began to appear. The first was a dream, one I had never had before. I stood in front of a mirror, but my reflection had no face. Where my features should have been, there was only a dark stain, slowly spreading outward, like ink bleeding through paper. When I woke, my pillow was soaked in sweat. The second sign came from a stranger. An old man stopped me on the street, stared at my forehead, and turned pale. He muttered a single sentence before walking away. "Your fate line is broken." By the third day, the news arrived. The Diep family had withdrawn from the engagement. No explanation, no apology, no acknowledgement of the vow made 2 decades earlier. They claimed the arrangement was outdated, superstitious, meaningless. To them, it was just a promise, made by old men who no longer mattered. To me, it was a death sentence. That night, I performed divination for the first time without restraint. The rules that had bound me since childhood shattered the moment they broke the vow. If destiny no longer honored its own structure, then neither would I. I cast 6 coins onto the table, 6 faces of disaster. The hexagram was unmistakable, 6-fold great misfortune. Before I could interpret further, the room grew cold. The oil lamp flickered violently, its flame bending toward the corner of the room as if drawn by breath. A low, dry chuckle echoed, not loud, but close enough that I felt it behind my ear. I did not turn around. I already knew what had arrived. Huang Jai Tian. The fox spirit did not reveal itself fully. It never does. Instead, it left a mark, an invisible pressure pressing down on the world. From that moment on, misfortune followed the Dieppe family like a shadow that refused to separate from its owner. I understood then what my grandfather had feared. Breaking a vow sealed by heaven does not erase it. It redirects the cost. I left the village 3 days later. There was nothing left for me there, only graves, memories, and a promise already shattered. The city awaited me like an open wound, pulsing with lives that moved too fast to notice the forces guiding them. My destination was a place few spoke of openly, Pho Thieu Phuong, a street known among practitioners as the Street of Mourning. Funeral homes lined both sides of the road, their signs faded by years of incense smoke and grief. The air smelled of paper ash and cold iron. At night, lanterns glowed red, not for celebration, but to guide spirits who had lost their way. This was where the living did business with death. It was also where I encountered the Tam family. They presented themselves as masters of geomancy, confident, refined, and deeply respected by ordinary people. Their rituals were elaborate, their language convincing, their prices steep, but something about them felt wrong. Their feng shui corrected surface problems but left deeper fractures untouched. Their talismans worked briefly, then failed catastrophically. They treated the unseen world like a tool, not a law. One night, a client arrived screaming. Paper servants, funeral effigies meant to guide the dead, had come alive in his house. They stood motionless during the day, but at night they moved, whispered, watched. The Tam brothers insisted it was nothing more than residual yin energy. They were lying. I could feel it the moment I stepped inside the house. The paper figures were not possessed. They were angry. Someone had bound them incorrectly, forcing spirits into temporary vessels without sealing the exit. When the spirits realized they were trapped, resentment formed. That resentment was now feeding. The situation escalated quickly. Objects flew, lights shattered. A paper figure lunged at a child. I did not hesitate. I broke my grandfather's final rule completely. Using techniques I had sworn never to touch, I cut the spiritual bindings, released the trapped souls, and burned the effigies with consecrated fire. The house fell silent immediately. The child lived. The Tam brothers stared at me in horror. They knew then what they were not. That night, word spread through Pho Thieu Phuong. A real practitioner had arrived, but power never goes unnoticed for long. From the shadows of the city, something else began to watch me, something older, patient, and amused. Huang Jai Tian had not left. It had simply followed me into a world far more crowded with temptation, fear, and broken promises. And somewhere in the city, the woman tied to my fate was already walking closer to the center of the storm, unaware that the cost of a broken vow was about to be collected. There are moments when hesitation becomes a sin. The incident on Pho Thieu Phuong should never have escalated the way it did. After the paper servants were destroyed, most people believed the danger had passed. The house was quiet. The spirits were gone. The family thanked the Tam brothers and prepared offerings of gratitude. Only I knew the truth. The resentment had not disappeared. It had simply changed direction. That night, as I prepared to leave, the air shifted. Incense smoke stopped rising and began to coil sideways, forming slow, deliberate circles. The child I had saved suddenly screamed. clutching his chest as if something were squeezing his heart from the inside. I felt it instantly. A curse rebound. The Tam brothers had sealed the house improperly. When the paper vessels burned, the remaining yin energy had nowhere to disperse. It turned inward, searching for the weakest living vessel. The child was dying. I froze. My grandfather's voice echoed in my memory, calm and merciless. Before 21, your fate is not yours to use. After 21, every choice will demand payment. I was past the age now, but the cost had never changed. If I intervened fully, I would be crossing a line I could never return from. The parents knelt before me, begging. Their fear was raw, animal, stripped of pride and reason. In their eyes, I saw something far worse than death. Hope. I moved. There was no time for careful preparation. I cut my palm and pressed it against the child's forehead, using my blood to anchor his soul. I recited a binding chant meant only for those who had accepted lifelong consequences. The room shook. Shadows tore themselves free from the walls, shrieking as they were forced out. I felt something inside me tear as well, something my grandfather had spent decades protecting. The child collapsed. Then he breathed. The house fell silent. The curse was broken. But as I withdrew my hand, my vision blurred. The room tilted violently, and a metallic taste filled my mouth. Blood dripped onto the floorboards, dark and thick. I knew that sensation. This was not illness, it was judgment. I staggered into the street and collapsed beneath a flickering red lantern. As consciousness faded, I felt laughter brush against my ear, soft, amused, ancient. Huang Jiatian was pleased. When I awoke, dawn was breaking over. The city. The sky was pale, almost innocent, as if nothing unnatural had occurred. But my body felt heavier, as though gravity itself had increased overnight. Word spread quickly. Some called me a savior. Others called me reckless. A few whispered a name they had not spoken in years. Dhamma Kuitu. I ignored them all. Power invites attention, but it also invites predators. It was only a matter of time before Huang Jiatian made its next move. I felt it 3 days later while standing in a crowded cafe near the Diep family residence. The scent of roasted coffee suddenly soured, turning sharp and bitter. Conversations blurred into a low hum, as if the room had dipped underwater. Then I saw her, Hua Tin. She walked in smiling, her posture relaxed, her eyes bright. To anyone else, she looked perfectly normal, healthy, cheerful, alive. To me, she reeked of foxfire. Her shadow did not align with her movements. It lagged half a second behind, stretching unnaturally along the floor. When she laughed, I heard a second voice layered beneath it, dry, rasping, ancient. Huang Jiatian had found a vessel, not a random one. A woman close to Diep Honggu. That was when I understood the truth. The fox spirit was not attacking blindly. It was following procedure. The Diep family had broken a vow sealed by heaven. The debt could not be collected from contracts or words. It required blood, fear, and loss. Hua Tin was merely the knife. That night, reports flooded Fo Tio Puong. People claimed to see Hua Tin walking barefoot through intersections at midnight, whispering names to passing strangers. Dogs howled as she passed. Children cried without reason. By the 4th night, Diep Honggu herself was targeted. She began hearing knocking at her window, 3 slow taps, always at the same hour. When she looked outside, no one was there. But every morning, fox paw prints appeared beneath the glass. I confronted Hua Tin in an alley behind the deep estate. The air dropped instantly. Her smile twisted, stretching too wide for her face. "So," she said, voice splitting into two tones, "you finally noticed." I demanded she leave the body. She laughed. "Why would I?" the fox replied through human lips. "She invited me in. All I did was accept." That was the cruelest part. Possession did not always require force. Sometimes it required permission, spoken or not. I realized then how deep the trap had been set. Huang Jai-tian did not intend to kill quickly. It wanted Diep Hongnu to suffer, to doubt, to fear her own reflection, to beg. I raised my hand, preparing to strike. But something stopped me. If I destroyed the fox spirit now, I would be openly challenging a force tied directly to heavenly retribution. This was no longer about saving one person. This was about rewriting a verdict already passed. My grandfather had warned me about this moment. Some debts cannot be erased. They can only be inherited. As I lowered my hand, Huang Jai-tian leaned closer, its eyes glowing behind Hua Tin's. "Choose carefully," it whispered. "Every step you take toward her pulls you further away from him." I knew who it meant. My grandfather, the man who had already died once for me. And yet, as I watched Diep Hongnu's window flicker with light in the distance, I also knew something else. If I walked away now, the price would not stop accumulating. It would simply come due all at once. There are moments when the world narrows to a single breath. For me, it was the night Diep Hongnu screamed. The sound cut through the city like broken glass. Not loud, just sharp enough to pierce every instinct I had spent a lifetime suppressing. I knew where it came from before my mind caught up. The vow, the fox spirit, the debt. Her apartment door was locked from the inside. The windows were sealed. And yet, something was already in the room. With her, I felt Huang Jai-tian the moment I crossed the threshold. The air vibrated with restrained hunger, thick with the kind of pressure that bends incense smoke downward. Symbols I had placed weeks earlier cracked and fell from the walls, shattering like cheap porcelain. The fox spirit was done playing. Diep Hongnu stood frozen in the center of the room, her eyes wide, her breath shallow. Behind her reflection in the mirror, another face stared back, elongated, smiling, ancient. Hua Tin's body lay slumped against the wall. Possession was no longer partial. Huang Jai-tian had fully crossed over. "You're late," the fox said, its voice echoing from every surface. "I was beginning to think you'd chosen to obey." I did not respond. I drew the blade my grandfather had forbidden me to touch. A weapon meant not to kill spirits, but to sever contracts written beyond human law. The moment the blade left its sheath, the room screamed. This was the line. Once crossed, there would be no return. The fox lunged, time fractured. I felt teeth graze my shoulder, burning cold, tearing through flesh and memory alike. The blade met resistance, not bone, not spirit, but something denser, law, tradition. The accumulated weight of vows broken and ignored. I pushed through. The strike landed. Huang Jai-tian shrieked as its form unraveled, foxfire spilling across the floor like molten gold. The mirror exploded outward, glass embedding itself into the walls. Diep Hongnu collapsed into my arms. The fox spirit did not die. It fled, wounded, enraged, and very much alive. As the room fell silent, I felt it. The backlash, pain unlike anything I had known before, surged through my chest, crushing, relentless. I tasted blood again, older, heavier this time. The blade slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor. I had broken the law openly, not by accident, not by desperation, by choice. and the world took note. They say victory brings relief. They are wrong. Diepeng Ngu survived. Hua Tin lived, though she remembered nothing of the possession. To everyone else, it was an unexplained medical emergency, stress, hallucination, a bad night. To me, it was proof of something far worse. Huang Jietian had not acted alone. Fox spirits do not cross into the human world without invitation, not directly and not at this scale. Someone had guided it, opened a door, provided a path. The broken vow was only the trigger. The real hand behind it was still hidden. In the days that followed, my body began to fail in small, terrifying ways. I lost sensation in my fingertips. Shadows lingered too long behind me. At night, I dreamed of my grandfather standing at the edge of a grave, watching silently as I walked further away from him. I understood the message. Every step I took to protect her was pulling me deeper into the debt he had paid in advance. I had not erased the price. I had inherited it. Fo Tiu Huang whispered my name now, not with reverence but fear. Practitioners avoided my gaze. Spirits watched from corners they had never occupied before. The balance had shifted. Diepeng Ngu tried to thank me. I stopped her. Some debts should never be acknowledged aloud. As I stood alone beneath the red lanterns, one truth became unavoidable. This was no longer about a single vow or a single spirit. Someone was testing the limits of heaven's law, and I was standing directly in the way. The story did not end with the fox spirit's defeat. It began there. Because once you challenge a judgment written beyond human sight, the world does not respond with forgiveness. It responds with escalation. The modern world does not deny fate. It simply believes it can renegotiate it. We live surrounded by contracts, systems, and laws written by human hands. And because of that, we assume every rule in existence works the same way. Flexible, replaceable, and designed for convenience. Promises are treated like drafts. Vows are treated like outdated customs. Responsibility is something to be managed, not honored. That belief is not progress. It is arrogance dressed as confidence. The Daip family did not suffer because they believed in spirits. They suffered because they believed a vow sealed beyond human authority could be discarded without cost. They assumed the unseen world would accept silence as an answer. It never does. In the past, people feared breaking sacred rules, not because they were ignorant, but because they understood something modern society has forgotten. Some structures exist to restrain human excess. When belief disappears, restraint disappears with it. And when restraint is gone, the pressure builds until something breaks. That is when consequences return, sudden, brutal, and misunderstood. We blame coincidence. We blame stress. We blame the randomness of life. Anything except ourselves. I did not inherit my fate because I sought power. Inherited it because others wanted freedom without limits. Every time a promise is broken for convenience, someone else absorbs the cost. Every time a warning is mocked, someone else becomes the example. The unseen world does not demand worship. It demands balance. Technology has not made us safer from consequence. It has only made us faster at reaching it. We move too quickly to notice the lines we cross, and too proudly to admit when we should turn back. When the damage surfaces, we search for explanations that fit our worldview, not the truth that caused it. This story is not about fox spirits or curses. It is about a world that no longer fears what it cannot see, and therefore no longer fears what it does. It is about people who believe intelligence has replaced humility and speed has replaced wisdom. But the rules we ignore do not disappear. They wait. And when they are finally enforced, they do not arrive as lessons. They arrive as losses. That is the price of a world that believes everything can be revised, except the consequences it never wanted to face. If you want to follow the rest of this story, to uncover who invited Hoang Jai Tian, to learn the true origin of Than Mang Kui Thu, and to see what price must finally be paid, subscribe to the channel. Follow for the next chapters. New episodes will continue this journey into fate, curses, and the cost of defying the unseen. The debt is not finished being collected, and the next chapter is far darker.